The Airbus A320-212 aircraft shown on the screen is ready to land at Bahrain International Airport. But after a failed landing, as soon as it goes around, the runway lights are turned off. There is a black darkness ahead, and the pilot is under the illusion that they are going in the right direction. In this confusion, they go 2 kilometers away from the airport, and suddenly the plane disappears from the radar. So where did this plane go? And what happened to the passengers on board? Did these people survive, or did they become victims of a tragedy? This is an astonishing story of Gulf Air Flight 072 that will leave you amazed. On August 23, 2000, Gulf Air Flight 072 is getting ready to fly from Cairo International Airport in Egypt to Bahrain International Airport. Flight 072 is being operated by this Airbus A320-212, which first flew on May 16, 1994. Before this flight, it had completed over 17,000 flying hours and 14,000 cycles. The flight is under the control of 37-year-old Bahraini captain Ihsan Shakib, who has 4,416 hours of flying experience. Out of that, he has gained 1,083 hours specifically flying the Airbus A320. Assisting the captain is 25-year-old First Officer Khalaf Al-Alawi, who has 608 flying hours of experience. Of those, 408 hours were on the Airbus A320. In fact, he was promoted to the position of First Officer for the Airbus A320 just a few months ago. The pilots have arrived at the airport to operate the flight and are taxiing the plane to the designated gate. However, due to a clerical error, they end up at the wrong gate. When the ground staff realizes the mistake, they bring the pilots back to the correct gate, which takes a considerable amount of time. Meanwhile, the passengers are becoming anxious, wondering where their plane is and why they haven't been allowed to board. After some time, once the mistake is identified, everything is set right, and they finally start boarding the passengers slowly. In just a few minutes, 135 passengers have boarded the plane, including 61 men, 37 women, and 37 children. In addition to them, there are 2 pilots and 6 cabin crew members on board. All 143 people are from 17 different countries, but most of them are residents of Egypt and Bahrain. After boarding, the plane is being prepared for taxiing, and once all checks are completed, it begins to move towards the runway. Once in position on the runway, the pilots request takeoff clearance from ATC. However, after waiting several minutes, they still do not receive permission to take off. In fact, due to the delay in taking off, the airspace has become busy, so ATC is unable to grant Flight 072 takeoff clearance. After a few more minutes of waiting, the pilots are finally given clearance, and Flight 072 departs from Bahrain at 4:52 p.m. local time. However, this flight is 52 minutes late, so its expected landing will be in the dark of night. This very fact will become a major trouble for this flight. At this moment, the plane is rapidly heading towards Bahrain, and the passengers are relaxing and enjoying the flight. Before reaching Bahrain, the plane has to pass through the Dammam airspace, so it enters this airspace. The Dammam air traffic controller gives permission for the flight to descend from 14,000 feet and instructs them to descend to 3,500 feet. This instruction is part of the normal process, where Dammam ATC clears flights to 3,500 feet before handing them over to Bahrain approach. Captain Shakib accepts this request, and about 2 hours after takeoff, the flight enters Bahrain airspace. Shortly after, the flight gets very close to the airport, prompting the captain to start lowering the plane's altitude. However, there is a problem. They need to land using the VOR approach because the airport does not have ILS, Instrument Landing System, facilities. For your information, VOR is a navigation system that helps aircrafts determine the correct direction. This system sends signals from a ground station which are received by the aircraft's receiver. It consists of two main signals, a reference signal and a variable signal. The reference signal is always broadcast from a fixed direction, which is towards the north, so the aircraft can know the ground station's direction relative to north. The second signal is the variable signal, which is broadcast as a rotating beam. This beam rotates 360 degrees, meaning it spins in every direction. When the aircraft receives the signal, it measures the position of the rotating beam. The aircraft's receiver picks up both signals and measures the angle difference between them. This means that accurately maintaining altitude becomes the pilot's responsibility. Now, Flight 072 contacts Bahrain approach and the controller confirms, "Controller, Gulf Air 072, Bahrain approach. Good evening. You've been identified and handed over. Your self-position is clear for runway 12. You have been cleared by Dammam to 3,500 feet. Confirm." However, Captain Shakib feels that they were cleared to 7,000 feet instead of 3,500 feet. So he tells First Officer Al-Alawi to inform them that they have been cleared to 7,000 feet. In reality, this was a significant misunderstanding, as the Dammam ATC had clearly ordered them to descend to 3,500 feet. In response, the controller explains that they have permission to descend to 3,500 feet, not 7,000 feet, and they should currently be at this altitude. Hearing this, Captain Shakib becomes extremely anxious because the plane is currently at almost double the required altitude. In this situation, he quickly disengages the autopilot and takes control of the plane. Meanwhile, the first officer also panics and tries to rapidly decrease altitude by pitching the nose down. However, by lowering the nose too much, the aircraft's speed increases, causing it to approach the runway at a dangerously high speed. The captain struggles to regain control of the plane. While lowering the nose reduces altitude, it fails to control the plane's speed. The plane's speed should be around 130 knots, but it is flying at 250 knots. Additionally, its altitude should be 1,500 feet, but it is currently at 1,670 feet. Now the captain has only one option: to abort the landing and attempt to land again after going around. However, ignoring the urgency of the situation, the captain stubbornly insists that they will land. Thus, flying at a very high speed, they get extremely close to the runway. At this moment, the captain lowers the landing gear and sets the flaps to position 1, preparing to land. Meanwhile, the first officer is confused about what is happening, and due to his limited experience, he doesn't know what to do in such a situation. So he tries to trust the captain and understand the circumstances. But the plane speed is so high that the captain realizes that there is no way they can make a safe landing. They have no time to think, and even a few seconds of delay could lead them to disaster. Therefore, they quickly pitch the nose of the plane upward. They turn left to go around and set the flaps to position 3. At position 3, the plane's speed increases significantly, and it rapidly veers left. Just then, at 7:29 and 41 seconds, the cockpit alarm for flap overspeed starts ringing. Within seconds, the plane is flying in complete darkness over the Persian Gulf, but the pilots have no idea what their altitude is or where exactly they are. To find this out, their only option is the primary flight displays, or the PFDs, which show the altitude indicators. However, after the flap over speed alarm goes off, the captain is entirely focused on adjusting the flaps and fixing the overspeed problem. The sudden loss of visual references for the runway makes the captain even more anxious. In this panic, he experiences a phenomenon called somatographic illusion. This illusion means that when you don't have a visual reference, your body thinks it's going in the right direction. The captain also feels that they are flying the plane in the right direction, but in reality the plane is moving away from the runway and its nose is angled 15 degrees down, causing it to lose altitude rapidly. Due to the pitch black night, there is thick darkness outside and the plane is descending in a different direction. The captain and the first officer are hopeful that they will manage a successful landing. At the same time, the passengers are starting to feel that it's time to land, so they appear excited to land at the airport as soon as possible. On the other hand, the captain is still under the illusion that they are heading in the right direction, so they continue to move forward even though the plane is now 2 kilometers away from the airport. At this time, according to Arabia Standard Time, it is 7:30. Just as the pilot is thinking about landing the plane, a loud explosion occurs and the plane crashes into the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, Bahrain ATC is waiting to see when Flight 072 will arrive for landing. And then they see that the plane has suddenly disappeared from the radar. ATC tries repeatedly to contact the pilot, but they receive no response. Everyone is worried about where Flight 072 will vanish in this thick darkness. They soon realize that something must have gone wrong with the plane, so a search operation is initiated immediately. After extensive searching, the rescue team spots the plane's scattered debris floating in the sea, confirming that the plane has crashed. This was a very tragic accident in which all 143 people on board lost their lives. In the wake of this terrible incident, Bahrain's Emir Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa declares 3 days of national mourning, and an investigation is launched to determine the causes of the painful crash. The investigation reveals several mistakes, the first being pilot error. In fact, Captain Shakib misinterpreted the clearances received from Dammam Control and instructed the first officer to descend to 7,000 feet, when they were supposed to descend to 3,500 feet. Due to this misunderstanding, the flight did not maintain the correct altitude. The second mistake was the flap settings, which were not set to the correct position, causing the plane's speed to increase further. The crash was also attributed to the pilot's lack of experience and improper training, which prompted several changes in the aviation industry to prevent such incidents from happening again. This was one of the most horrific tragic plane crashes in the Persian Gulf, and its memories are still fresh in people's minds today.